Hello everyone, I welcome to your lecture on acid-base imbalance. So here before we start into the topic, I want to let you know that I am not an expert in this subject, but I can make concepts sound very simple and easy. So this topic I will make sure that you understand the concept well, and so that you need not memorize anything and you can remember the reasons behind it and how to diagnose in an ICU. Acid base balance. First you should know the basics, that is what is the normal pH. The normal pH is always 7.35 to 7.45. What is the normal bicarbonate level? The bicarbonate is normal is 22 to 28 milliequivalents per liter. The normal PCO2 is 33 to 44 millimeter mercury. Acidosis. The term acidosis means, as it is very obvious, there is excess of acid. So how metabolic acidosis is when there is any derangement in bicarbonate. So if the bicarbonate is less, then it is metabolic acidosis. There is a low pH, that is an acidic pH, which is caused by low bicarbonate, because bicarbonate is an alkaline substance, isn't it? So when that alkalinity is low, it is metabolic acidosis. What is a compensation? Whenever there is a low in the bicarbonate or in the hydrogen, the compensation will be from the respiratory side. What is the respiratory side? It is the carbon dioxide. So here the low pH, which is caused by low bicarbonate, has to be compensated by carbon dioxide. But if carbon dioxide is retained within the body, carbon dioxide will be retained in the form of carbonic acid. Carbon dioxide will combine with water that is present. CO2 plus H2O will form H2CO3. That is carbonic acid. So if carbon dioxide is present more in the body, it will be in the form of carbonic acid, which is again an acid. But we already have metabolic acidosis. So as compensation, the carbon dioxide decreases to compensate, because we don't want more acid. In metabolic acidosis, there is a concept called as high anionic gap metabolic acidosis and normal anionic gap metabolic acidosis. What is an anionic gap? Sodium minus chloride plus bicarb, whatever that value, that is the anionic gap. Normally that value is around 8 to 12. But if in that condition, if we check the sodium, chloride and the bicarb and then calculate the anionic gap, if that gap is more than 12, then it is known as a high anionic gap. The most common mnemonic that is used is the mud piles, which are the reasons for high anionic gap, like methanol, uremia, diabetic ketoacidosis, fenformin, iron, INH, lactic acidosis, ethylene glycol and salicylates. All these are reasons for high anionic gap metabolic acidosis. Normal anionic gap metabolic acidosis. Anionic gap is calculated from this formula. If it is high is 13 or greater, but if it is in the normal range 8 to 12 milliequivalents per liter, then it is normal anionic gap. And still if the acidosis prevails, so that is metabolic acidosis. What are the causes for normal anionic gap metabolic acidosis? That is a renal tubular acidosis, addisons and diarrhea. The key point that we need to remember is, in these three causes, renal tubular acidosis, addisons and diarrhea, the anionic gap does not change. It is within the normal levels. So whenever a question is presented to you and you very easily find out that it is acidosis, then you have to calculate the normal anionic gap. If it is normal, then you can narrow down the diagnosis to these three. If it is abnormal or if it is higher, then we can narrow down the diagnosis to the mud piles. That is a use of this anionic gap. Let's see why does the anionic gap stays normal in diarrhea. What happens in diarrhea? In diarrhea, there is bicarbonate loss. There is excessive bicarbonate loss in the stool, particularly if it is a secretory diarrhea. Since bicarbonate is lost, to maintain the electrical neutrality, the chloride is absorbed. So what is the anionic gap? Sodium minus chloride plus bicarb. Even though the bicarbonate is lost, the chloride is increased. So that chloride plus bicarb, that value which we normally calculate, is adjusted with by the increase in chloride alone. Therefore, the anionic gap stays normal. So this is what happens in diarrhea. And in Addison's disease, also we have the normal anionic gap. So what happens in Addison's? Before that, what normally does the aldosterone does? Aldosterone promotes the sodium reabsorption and potassium and hydrogen excretion in the kidneys, isn't it? But in Addison's disease, because of the lack of aldosterone, it leads to impaired sodium reabsorption and there is a decreased excretion of potassium and hydrogen. That means we have retention of potassium and hydrogen ions. Since there is hydrogen ion retention, it results in Addison's disease, results in acidosis. But why is there a normal anionic gap? What happens to the chloride and the bicarb? There is a net loss of sodium. The sodium is not absorbed in Addison's because of aldosterone deficiency. The net loss of sodium will activate the renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. And in aldosterone deficiency, which happens in Addison's disease, we know that there is impaired hydrogen ion excretion, which leads to metabolic acidosis. And in addition to it, in Addison's disease, the kidney will retain the hydrogen ions and it will excrete the bicarbonate to maintain the balance. This is what we should know. Similar to diarrhea, here also in Addison's disease and in renal tubular acidosis, the bicarbonate is lost. Since the bicarbonate is lost, to maintain the electrical neutrality, and also there is again hyponatremia and hyperkalemia, which will drive the kidneys to retain the chloride. In this way, even though the bicarbonate is lost, the chloride is retained, resulting in normal anionic gap acidosis. What is metabolic alkalosis? Alkalosis is high pH. So metabolic is any derangement with bicarbonate. Bicarbonate is an alkaline substance. So therefore metabolic alkalosis is high pH caused by high bicarbonate, increase in bicarbonate. What happens what compensates whenever there is a metabolic derangement? The compensation is respiratory. So PCO2 compensates. How does PCO2 compensate? PCO2 is acidic. So in alkalosis it increases to compensate for metabolic alkalosis. What are the causes of metabolic alkalosis? Conn syndrome, renal artery stenosis, fibromuscular dysplasia, vomiting, loop diuretic and thiazides. How to remember all this? So in Conn syndrome, renal artery stenosis and in fibromuscular dysplasia, there is and also in a dehydration as that which happens in vomiting and associated with the diuretics also, there is decreased fluid volume, isn't it? So in vomiting, loop diuretic, thiazide, there is a decreased fluid volume. And in renal artery stenosis, because of the renal artery being stenosed, there is not adequate blood supply to the kidneys, and because of that, the body assumes that the whole body is suffering from water deficiency. Therefore, it will start reabsorbing more of sodium. Fibromuscular dysplasia is similar to renal artery stenosis, where there is a defect in the renal vessel and thereby the kidneys will falsely assume that there is defective water retention all throughout the body, and again it will start retaining the water. So because of the water retention which happens in all these conditions, there is increased sodium which is being absorbed and there is increased excretion of potassium as well as hydrogen. Since hydrogen is lost, we have metabolic alkalosis. Hydrogen is acidic, so hydrogen is lost, therefore we have metabolic alkalosis, and there is a high bicarbonate levels also. What happens in respiratory acidosis? Respiratory, as the name says, any change in carbon dioxide is respiratory. So acidosis is low pH. Low pH which is caused by high bicarbonate levels are respiratory acidosis. What is the compensation? Compensation will be from the bicarbonate. So that is the vice versa. Any change in bicarbonate, the compensation will be from carbon dioxide. Any change in carbon dioxide, the compensation will be from the bicarbonate. So here the primary defect is high carbon dioxide, therefore respiratory acidosis. And therefore the compensation is from the bicarbonate. So bicarbonate will goes up if it is chronic to compensate. That's bicarbonate is basic. We will see about the chronic and acute stage later. So how does respiratory acidosis happen? It is caused by high carbon dioxide. So when the body has to have a high carbon dioxide, it means the body has to hypoventilate. It should not ventilate. It is not able to let out all the oxygen which the body produces. So that happens in hyperventilation due to opioids, benzodiazepines and barbiturates, where the patient is not ventilating adequately. All these are acute causes. But whereas the chronic causes are chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, OSC, obstructive sleep apnea, obesity, as well as an ankylosing spondylitis, where they have a medical condition which does not allow them to exhale the carbon dioxide adequately. So these are the causes for respiratory acidosis. Respiratory alkalosis. Respiratory is any problem which is because of carbon dioxide. Alkalosis is carbon dioxide is acidic. So when that carbon dioxide is decreased, then it results in respiratory alkalosis. High pH, which is caused by low carbon dioxide. The compensation is by the bicarbonate. So since it is already alkaline, bicarbonate goes down to compensate. The causes are here, the carbon dioxide there is low carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide is washed away from the body. The causes are in acute, it is an asthma attack, panic attack, where pulmonary emboli and altitude sickness, where the patient is hyperventilating to remove and therefore the carbon dioxide is removed. And chronic is where they will be living at a high altitude. They will generally, the respiratory rate will be quite high to eliminate the carbon dioxide, and also in pregnancy. Compensation for acid balances, that's the respiratory compensation and metabolic compensation. One thing we need to remember is that respiratory compensation, when the primary defect is metabolic, that is whenever it is involving a bicarbonate, then the compensation has to happen by the respiratory side. So respiratory compensation can happen immediately because either they have to retain the carbon dioxide or they have to hyperventilate the carbon dioxide. So any respiratory compensation will be quick. But metabolic compensation, that is whether to increase or decrease the bicarbonate, it has to happen through the kidneys. So it will take time. That's what we should know. And another important formula is the Winter formula, which is used for predicting the PCO2, the carbon dioxide. This is mainly because sometimes two metabolic disorder might coexist, which we should not confuse. Say for example, let's see the Winter formula. The PCO2 is 1.5 times the bicarbonate plus 8 plus or minus 2. So that is the range. So in this condition, say for example, if a patient has a diabetic ketoacidosis, so that there is acidosis and the bicarbonate is 14. So we substitute the bicarbonate 14 in this and we expect the PCO2. Through this formula, we expect the PCO2 to be 27 to 31. So in DKE, diabetic ketoacidosis, what should be the compensation? PCO2 should decrease. So the PCO2 should be normally 27 to 31, should decrease, and this is how the PCO2 should be compensated. If the PCO2 is in this level, then it means it is adequately compensated. But if the PCO2 is lower than 27, it hasn't come down, it's lower than 27, then that means the patient has a concurrent respiratory alkalosis. There is another disorder too, which is respiratory alkalosis. But if it is higher than 31, then the patient has a concurrent respiratory acidosis. So in this way, we can use this Winter formula to predict the PCO2 and find out if there is any other concurrent diseases associated with it. Any other concurrent, mainly the respiratory alkalosis or acidosis. That's what we can find out from this Winter formula. Thank you for listening all this while. I am happy that you have come to the end of the slide. I hope this is helpful to you. If you have any questions, you can write to me. I am more than happy to clear all your doubts. I have an announcement for you. I am starting my mentoring lessons for medical graduates and USMLE aspirants. If you like my videos and if you like the way I teach, you can sign up for my mentoring class. I can't wait to see you succeed. Thank you. Have a good day.